Hey y'all, Eric here on a Sunday. Today is May the 11th, and everybody knows today is Mother's Day. So I'm focusing on that topic during this video. Outside it is cloudy, off and on rain. I think I may have seen the sun one time, maybe in the 11 to noon hour earlier today. Good thing today was my total day off from any workout activity, whether it was my 5 mile walk or some body and weight work, even my chair yoga, which I might do. Excuse me, sorry, just ate. Apologies. I might do the yoga tonight before I go to bed so that I can get some good rest and maybe, hopefully, at some point tomorrow do my 5 mile walk. But apparently, according to the weather, 100% chance of rain, maybe all day on Monday. But we'll see after Monday gets here. So, anyone out there raising children who identifies as a female or is female, happy Mother's Day. Before I dive into it, let me just go ahead and specifically shout out Mother's Day to some of my Facebook friends. Um, some of you are not mothers yet, but you will be. And some of you are maternal leaders as well. When I say maternal leaders, it means that your aunties, you are neighborhood aunties, maybe neighborhood moms, so on and so on. But shout out to Chi Chi, a former coworker of mine. Shout out to Susan Peebles, who's also a former coworker of mine. Shout out to Lisa Williams. We worked in the same company where she was a junior vice president. Shout out to Latasha Wynn, Candace Whiteside, Jennifer Ellis, Jaslyn Anderson, Kim Myers, Lindsay Long. Lindsay was a very good friend of mine out in Kansas City. Jennifer Schilling was also a former coworker of mine. Glenda Lewis was a former coworker of mine. Alicia Davis Nichin, she and her wife are raising some kids. Shelley Schoenfield, friend from back in the day with Al Charlotte. And we're moving right along through. I got a couple of more. Kate Martinez, a very good friend of mine that I used to work with out in Kansas City. Um, Daughter just graduated from college. Son is blazing across the country as a dancer. Suzanne, who's former military, is a mom and a grandmother. And I believe that takes care of my Facebook people. And in this video, I will also shout out to my housemate's sister and his mother. I sent them text messages wishing them a happy Mother's Day. My sister in law, my brother's wife, I called her this morning because it occurred to me that she and I have never heard each other's voices. Um, that is a side story that I may get into later on in this video, but it's just because my brother and I lost touch when we were in our 20s and just reconnected last year after I found him, thinking about him, and decided to look for him and found him on LinkedIn and then found him on Facebook and then sent him a message. And my sister in law is the one who told him, hey, you need to talk to your brother. And that's how we started talking again. And so, um, and then some of the new people that I've met through my chamber membership, through the Carolinas LGBT Chamber, Mel Morris, Abby Medeiros, I think her name is Medoros or Medeiros, and some of the others I just met. Happy Mother's Day to all of you. And what prompted this video was text messages I received from my brother nugget of background information. My brother and I are brothers through our father. We have different mothers. Our father was married to each of our mothers at different times. And so he sent me a text on Friday that it was a sad day for him because 30 years ago, Friday, his mother passed away. And he was in his feelings about it. And I responded back to the text, giving him virtual hugs from his brother. My mother passed away the same year as his mother, but she didn't pass away until October, so it's still 30 years this year that my mother passed away. And so also some of the people in my neighborhood, before I forget, Elizabeth and Vanessa, I did wish them happy Mother's Day. They are mothers and grandmothers. But some of the grandmothers I'm holding off until Grandparents' Day to wish them happy Grandparents' Day. So apologize for the background noise. I think Google is listening to me, but hopefully not. So the way that my brother was feeling actually prompted me to think about my relationship with my mother. As we have talked over the last months, both of us were very, very close to our mothers, particularly with his mother. He's the oldest child, and he had siblings under him through her. With my mom, I was the only child. And while we lived with her parents, my mother was very, very careful to make sure that she was a full-time parent, and she was. She worked a lot, taking care of, later years, taking care of me as I grew up, and then taking care of her parents as well. But I think about that relationship that I have with my mom, and even today, sometimes when I'm in a bad place, I would sometimes wish I could talk to her. And I do still sometimes to her spirit. But it's nothing like being able to pick up the phone to talk to your mom. And on the other side of that, one of my best friends actually has the opposite relationship with his mother. He always talks about how he doesn't get the support that he needs from his mom. And I've known people who have been thrown away by their mothers. I know people who have contentious relationships with their mothers. And those are real situations. And so, and even when we say that, well, you only get one mother, that doesn't help a lot of times. But in my case, I lost my mother to cancer. She was actually going to go into the hospital to have a third of her right lung taken out due to lung cancer. But when she went in, they did x-rays and all of that as preliminary precautions before surgery and found a mass on her brain. And it was determined that it was inoperable. And that is actually what killed her. I wasn't there when she died. I was here in Charlotte working, and my aunt called me to let me know that she died. That's a whole other story that started me on this path that I may talk about in a future video, but I'm not going to get into that now. And so it devastated me because her death happened within a 12-month period of me losing my major job, and the job that I had at the time she died, I had just gotten it. So I lost my major income, and I was actually sending money every so often to help her out because my mom's sister lived with him. And as they got older, there were things that they couldn't do that I would send money home to help them get done. And the relationship that I was in at the time also ended. So, lost my boyfriend, lost my job, and then I lose my mom, all virtually at the same time. I was in my 30s at the time, early 30s, and 32, as a matter of fact, 32, 33. And I wasn't close to her family, to my mom's family anymore, except my aunt. I wasn't close to my cousins anymore because we went different paths. Never kept in touch with them, primarily because I was gay. And I just didn't want to have to deal with that. And I'm sorry for the noise, I have my window open. And so I, the only person that I even cared about who might, I would say, get rid of me for being gay would have been my mother, and that was not the case. Everybody says that moms know. Well, I can tell you, my mom did not know. When I told her, the look on her face for about 30 seconds, it was shock. I caught her off guard when I told her. But I didn't want anything between us. And that's one reason why I told her. My grandparents were still alive. My grandparents had passed away by that time. And I had no intention of telling them, because particularly my grandfather, because I knew how he felt. And there was not going to be any changing his mind, so there was no reason for me to say anything to him. But my mom was cool with it. And my aunt, I didn't care, but then she was cool with it. And we just went on, and after that 30 seconds of shock, we just changed the subject and talked about other things. And so when she died, I didn't have her to talk to about the loss of my relationship at the time. I didn't have her to talk to regarding being my cheerleader, reminding me that I was smart and I had a degree and all of that, and I would be able to find another job to take the place of the one that I had at that time, and keep going. So I would say I was just walking in a fog for about 7 years, mainly due to the loss of my relationship, because that relationship was built around the two of us, and my identity, for the most part, was cemented in that relationship, and it was cemented being the son of my mother. Because every time I go home, they would say, "You're Ann's boy," or "You're Jesse's grandboy." Jesse was my grandfather and my mother's father. My brother had the same thing when his mom passed away. He said, "You're RT's boy or grandboy." All they had to do was look at us, and they knew who we belonged to. So, but for years, years and years and years, I didn't, because once I got in my 20s, I went off to college. I stayed in college. After I graduated from college, I didn't come home. I stayed away, but I kept in contact. But I didn't, truthfully, I didn't go home nearly as much as I should have. I didn't. And sometimes me and my friends would joke around when I would get a letter that would have nothing, would be a piece of paper. At the top would be the X where I was, and a quarter, so that I could use a payphone to call home. And then there would be lines drawn. At the bottom would be a picture of a house, which would X marks the spot with my home. That was my summons to come home. And so it was a two-step process. I called to acknowledge that I received the summons, and then I would mark out some time and go home. And so I did. And so that became a running joke. But like I said, I was gone a good bit of the time after I graduated from high school. And then to be away when she died, I wasn't there. I always regretted that. I wasn't there when she passed so that I could say goodbye. I visited her when she was in the hospital, but after the morphine took over, and some of the things that she was saying, again, I did not know how to process it. I didn't, and I didn't recognize her. I could see her physically, but the way that she was talking to me, the way that she spoke to other people, how her movements, I didn't recognize her. That was not my mother. That was not the woman that I knew to be my mother. And so I disconnected. At my mother's funeral, my godmother tried to console me. My godson tried to console me. But I just wasn't having it. I wasn't having it. I was angry that God took her away from me. And I was inconsolable. And I walked away from my family. There's a story for that, and it happened on the day of the funeral, but I'm not getting into that now. And I haven't spoken to them since. And so from that point on, I just didn't think about it. I was just in my feelings about everything. Nothing was working out the way that I wanted it to. And I was angry with my mom for leaving me too for a long time. But I understood, and I had to remember how she raised me. How she raised me and who she raised me to be. And in some small shape or form with that, I struggled for about 15 years. On my 40s, I tell everybody that if there was a decade of my life that I could erase or go back and do all over again, it would be my 40s. Because relationship-wise, there hasn't really been one since then. The way that I engage with people, it hasn't been the same since then. I'm an extrovert naturally. I'm an extrovert naturally, but I became an introvert. I used to blame it on COVID, but no. If I'm honest, it was there way before that. And so even today at 62, my birthday's coming up next week. So I'm automatically saying that I'm 63. I've come to some realizations, and I accept a lot of the blame for what has transpired in my life. I have fucked up royally. And there are some things that I have done that I know she wouldn't be proud of. She'd still be proud of me. But I know that I can see her now coming at me saying, "Who raised you? Who are you?" Because it would be out of character for me. And I'm not talking about anything illegal or anything like that. But just like I tell a lot of people, I have a lot of knowledge, but I'm not smart because of some of the financial mistakes that I've made. And so even now, in the position that I'm in now, I'm having to pump the brakes and I'm having to remind myself of some things because I'm finding myself getting a little overwhelmed. My mom had me when she was 22, and I can't say for sure that if the cancer hadn't taken her, if she would still be alive today. But I think I would be a a bigger personality. It's the only thing I can think of off the fly. If she was still in my life, she would be my constant. And I try to say that she is my northern star, but there have been some dark clouds over the last few years that have kept me from seeing that northern star. And so my point is on this Mother's Day, particularly for those of us who are older, who don't have their mothers anymore, remember, just remember, even if it's the smallest of things, remember and let that give you comfort. You know, the loss of a parent is painful, just like the loss of a child. The pain never goes away. But at least for my journey, the pain has lessened over time. And when I can emote this in conversations with other people about their mothers, it helps me navigate that. And it helps me, while validating their feelings, it helps me help them navigate that journey. Because they have to go on that journey themselves. And so, as I said, on this Mother's Day, remember a single act that made you believe that your mother was a goddess. You know, my story has always been about a Christmas present I wanted when I was 8 years old. My mother would move heaven and earth to get me something if she could. And so at that time, the hottest toy at that time was called a Busy Buzz pen. I mean, it was a writing pen, but it was a toy. There were none to be had in the city that we lived in, which is down the road on 85 in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Nowhere. My godmother got involved, reaching out to her people. My mom's sisters got involved, reaching out to nobody could find it. Well, it turns out that somebody my mom went to college with lived in Atlanta, and they just happened to see some in a store in Atlanta. My mother, my godmother, and my aunt got into my mom's car while I stayed with my grandparents and drove to Atlanta under the guise of something. And my grandmother had already put me to bed anyway. So I didn't know anything about it. So they drove to Atlanta, got to the store, got lost, but got to the store within 15 minutes of the store closing. My mom beat 2 other people to the counter and got the last one. Got the last one. Drove back from Atlanta the same night so that she could be there Christmas morning to wake me up. And so I would have the Busy Buzz pen that I wanted. I will never forget that story. My mother did that for me. And it wasn't the only time that she did something like that for me either. You know, we had our ups and downs. But there's something about a relationship between mothers and sons. And I would ask that my nephew, if he ever sees this video, think about that with regard to his mother, who's my sister-in-law. We only get one. if at all possible, please make peace with whatever issue you have and cement it. Not everyone is going to be able to do that. But if you have that power, do so. And moms, you have that power also. Make it right while you still have time. All right. So I'm going to end it there. I hope everybody was able to have a great Mother's Day. For those of you who are not in Charlotte, I hope you have much better weather than we had here. But I will see you next time with another video. Take care.